Hi, this is Josh with comicsverse.com, and this is Nick with Modern Storyteller, and we are here to talk about the Forgotten City, as you can see right behind us. So Nick, this started off as a mod, this game originally. What motivated you to make it into a full game?
That's a great question. So look, I was playing a lot of big RPGs at the time, and they're great for what they are, but I always sort of felt like there's not a lot of really emotionally powerful stories in there. So I just set myself the challenge of creating this really powerful emotional story that sort of leaves people with shivers. So about 1,700 hours later, I had this mod called The Forgotten City, and it's since been downloaded by 2.5 million people and won a National Writers Guild Award. So I was at the time I was a bored lawyer, and I thought, why am I doing this professional thing when I could be making games, which is awesome, and people seem to like what I do. So I quit my job, and I've spent the last couple of years developing The Forgotten City as a standalone game. I've been working for like 80 hours a week for the last 2 years, just about, but it's a labour of love. It's heaps of fun making it, and I think you can see from the game itself that a lot of love has been poured into it.
So why did you decide to pick ancient Rome for the setting, as opposed to say ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, ancient China? I mean, is it because it's what you know, or just is because you like the setting, or why did you choose Rome?
That's an excellent question. So a couple of reasons. Firstly, because I think that ancient Roman art and architecture is just extraordinarily beautiful, and I've done a lot of research in history, and I took a trip to Rome, and I was just really inspired. But also because of philosophical reasons. So the game is basically it's a murder mystery, and it's a bit of a long story, but basically in the city, if anyone commits a sin, everybody dies, and so that naturally leads to questions about, what constitutes a sin? Like, what is good and evil? How do you figure out what's the difference between right and wrong? And I chose a Roman setting because they had very different views about what's right and wrong than we do. So, for example, in ancient Rome, if you in the Republican era, if you went into debt to somebody and you couldn't pay your debt, then you would become their slave. That's by our standards today, that's obviously horrific. But to them, that was just the way things were done. That was considered normal. And so in the game, the player gets to sort of explore this sort of world broken in half between people who have adopted this Roman morality and people who have adopted a kind of modern morality. And so exploring the interplay between those two and sort of seeing how they conflict and seeing the dilemmas they create is really fascinating, I think.
This game is obviously very narrative driven, very, has a lot of choices to make, and each one will impact the game. Like, a problem I've found with a lot of these games with choice systems is that they can often be too binary, in that, you can either be you can be Jesus or Hitler with no in between, and or there's a right choice and a wrong choice. So what sets it apart? Do you think this avoids that problem?
I think we do, yeah. I think there's I always sort of see morality as a spectrum rather than this sort of dichotomy of right and wrong. And so typically wherever there are good answers and bad answers, there are also sort of grey area answers. And I think actually the game thrives in the grey area. Like to get the best endings, the player will definitely have to transgress their own moral code and sort of compromise on their ethical principles. It's definitely it explores and has a bit of fun with those sort of grey areas in morality.
Yeah. Speaking of the best endings, this game obviously you say it has multiple endings. So how much effort do you think they'll have to put in to get all the different endings? Do you think it'll be a long-lasting thing? You get what I mean?
I think that the game's designed for replayability, so it has role-playing elements and multiple choice, and people respond to you based on who you are and what you've done, and also the endings are quite unique to the player's choices. So I think hopefully people will get at least 2, maybe even 3 plays out of it before they're done with it.
Ah, nice. And one last question. So the game, it seems to take a lot of influence from games like Majora's Mask. It reminds me a lot of that. What games would you say influenced you to make this? Even if not Majora's Mask, did any other games may have influenced you?
Yeah, it's a good question. So some of the big classic RPGs, definitely. I'm a huge fan of RPGs and also adventure games. The old school, LucasArts point and click type adventure games. Primo, love those. I think those are my influences.
Do you have anything else you would like to say about the game before we close off?
Just that it's coming to PC and Xbox One in late 2019, and if you're interested in the game, I would love it if you would add it to your wish list on Steam.